In conversation with Leo Barron. Leo Barron is a combat veteran and renowned author of heart-pounding military techno-thriller that gripped readers until the very end. Opla Fuda, his previous novel, has received rave reviews on both Amazon and Goodreads, earning an impressive 4.5 out of 5 star from over 1,400 readers. In his latest book, Ego Against the Beer, a chronicle of war-free, Baron once again delivers a gripping and intense tale filled with realistic depictions of combat and the horror of war. Baron works from Amentum as an instructor of military intelligence officer for the U.S. Army. He holds undergraduate and graduate degree in history and has served with the Onyx Airborne. Baron has since two active duty tours in Iraq as an infantry and intelligence officer. His articles about Bastogne and others World War II-related military topic have appeared in Infantry Magazine, Military Intelligence Professional Bulletin, WWII History Magazine, and WWII Magazine. His nonfiction books include No Silent Night, The Christmas Battle for Bastogne, Patterns at the Battle of the Bulge, How the Generous Tank Turned the Tide at Bastogne, I Tied in the Korean War, How an Unnumbered American Regiment Defeated the Chinese at the Battle of Chipyong-ni, and Patton's First Victory, How General George Patton turned the tide in North Africa and defeated the Afrika Korps at Guettar. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to offer the show today, Leo Barron. Welcome on the show, Leo.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's quite lovely we're here today. I must say you've had a trunk load of bio, quite an impressive accomplishment you've got in there. A lot of, war entwined novels in there. Quite impressive, really. And I'm excited we're here to sit down and have a conversation around your novels. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me once again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, really. So, Leo, I need to first say that I was taken aback by Upland Fooder, one of your novels, the one about the World War III on Amazon, which I found to be quite amazing and quite
hmm
beautiful. But then I wanted to ask you, what inspired the making of this book? How did you come in terms with writing novels that has a theme of war encapsulated in them? If you can run us through the making of this and how you find interest, how you pick interest particularly in war-themed literature, that would be great, really.
Okay. As you notice from reading my biography, I had been writing nonfiction
Mm.
for a while. Four nonfiction books,
Wow.
and I was getting ready to write another one, and uh, COVID happened. And
Mm.
so for a while, like a lot of you, I was, forced to work from home.
Mm.
And so I was kind of bored, honestly. And so I was like, let's do something different.
Mm.
And I stumbled upon some information when I was studying another project for work,
Mm.
the centerpiece of Oplam Folda, which was a declassified operations order
Mm.
from the Cold War
Oh,
that was basically served as the kind of like the skeleton of the story of Manfolda. And so I sat there. It was COVID. I had more time because I wasn't going out, doing things like everyone else. And so that's when I wrote it. And for a after I wrote it, I tried to publish it the traditional way through, publishers, like I'd done my other four books, which are all through traditional publishers.
mm.
And no one really seemed interested. Uh, and so as a result, I was like, and it was my wife who actually suggested it. She's like, well, you try doing Amazon self-publishing.
Mm.
And I kind of was like, I don't know, self-publishing has kind of a bad rap. But she said, hey, it's a different world now from when you started writing. which it
Yeah,
had changed a lot. So
absolutely.
I self-published it, and it turns out people did want to read
Yeah.
about it. So it's had some moderate success. So yeah, that's how I came about to writing that book.
I'm excited that your wife gave you some leap of faith into self-publishing, which I think it's quite exciting, really.
Well,
Yeah, we should take the glory back to self-publishing.
um, well, my wife is very smart. She's smarter than me, and so I
Oh,
generally, when she tells me and advises me to do something, it usually is probably a good idea.
I love
So I was like, yeah, yeah. So that's how I ended up.
I love
Um, Now, in terms of like it being like alternate history, uh, I was always a big fan of when I was growing up. I was always a big fan of reading books from authors like Tom Clancy, probably one of the main ones, and that just kind of got me, interested. And so I said, hey, why don't I try my hand,
mm,
see if I can do this, and
absolutely.
it worked. It worked. So I was very excited. Um, so now here we are. I decided to try to write something more current, which is what Eagle Against the Bear is about. That's a more current, um, World War III story that's happening in the near future. And Opland Fulda was a standalone book, not part of a series or anything, whereas Eagle Against the Bear is going to be part of of a series. And to be honest, I don't know how many books I actually plan on writing. I have a general idea, but I don't know if it's going to end up being 4 or 5 books.
Um,
The second book for Eagle Against the Bear, which will be Eagle Against the Bear, The Battle for Moscow, that should be coming up in November of this year. So basically for the Christmas season.
Oh wow, that's interesting to know, really. And I must say, you've got a lot ongoing on your deck, and that's quite impressive, really. That's quite a lot you've got ongoing. And also, Leo, you've had a career both as a military officer and as an historian. How have those two worlds shaped the way you approach writing about military history? How have they shaped your storytelling techniques? How have they shaped the kind of characters that you write about? How have they shaped your transitioning, your plot twist, the making of your novel generally, and the kind of literature that you engage yourself in? If in any way, I'm just curious.
So the short answer is yes, absolutely. It has shaped how I write. The long answer is, to give you some ideas. Uh, so I just from being in the military,
Mm,
being a historian, the historian part, because I got my master's degree, I learned a lot of research techniques in
wow,
terms of where to find the right documents and everything.
right.
Um, and then as a military officer, it helped me understand how to read those documents because a lot of times, and it's not, it's just the way it is. If you're a civilian historian and you try to write about military stuff, there might be things in the documents, a lot of times like acronyms or military symbols that are like its own language. You might have a hard time understanding.
Mm,
But having, served in the military, I have that ability to like read uh, the acronyms, read the operations orders, and understand symbology. And that can apply even to reading documents from other countries. So let's say
absolutely.
I'm reading, I'm reading a World War II document from the German army in the Second World War. They had their own map symbology. Now, I know they probably have a symbol for this or an artillery gun or something. And just
Yeah,
knowing that that information is out there, it kind of helped me
yeah.
translate some of these German map symbols.
Mm,
Uh, the other thing that is really helped more so for my nonfiction stuff
yeah.
is when I'm interviewing when I'm interviewing veterans, I automatically have a common experience that I can share with them from going back to my own experience serving 2 tours in Iraq. Now, granted, you know, fighting insurgents and terrorists is a little far different than fighting, you know, Chinese soldiers or German soldiers, but there are some common themes that a lot of times a veteran will open up to me that they might not even have even shared that experience with their own family, just because I have that common kind of, you know, shared experience. And so that's helped me a lot. Yeah, it's funny you ask, because when I joined the military originally, which would have been 1997, so I served for 10 years. I did not retire. I just served 10 years. I'd actually, part of it was I want to be an author and I want to write military nonfiction and fiction. And I felt it was important to actually have those experiences in order to have some kind of credibility when I would go write about those things. So that was kind of in my decision-making tree when I came up with the idea of enlisting in the U.S. Army. So.
Oh, wow. That's an amazing one, really. I love your take on that. I love your answer to that, really. Quite beautiful and quite awesome to me. And also, Leo, your book, No Silent Night, covers the Battle of Bastogne during Christmas. I wanted to ask you, what drew you to that specific moment in history, and how do you pick your topic for your nonfiction narrative histories? I'm not sure if you get that.
Okay. No, I get it. So the first question, as a kid, I was always fascinated by World War II. You know, I was kind of a nerd.
Wow.
So I read a lot of history books as a kid. I remember when I was like 8 years old, reading books about both D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Battle of the Bulge, but that was a big battle fought between the U.S. Army and the German Army at the end of the Second World War, specifically at Christmas time. It was basically December of 44 through January of 45. And as it stands, it was probably that it's ever fought, you know, in its history in terms of all the, you know, soldiers involved. So I've always was interested in the topic. And then when I joined the Army, and then when I became an officer, and I was a second lieutenant, I ended up serving in the 101st Airborne. So the 101st Airborne is a pretty famous division in the U.S. military. And one of the reasons why it's so famous is because it was the unit that was surrounded during the Battle of Bastogne. And so it has a lot of history behind it. And then I found myself in that, you know, I was in that unit, and it's part of, we call, you know, the esprit de corps for the unit history. All the people who serve in the 101st know about the 101st history, especially after the miniseries Band of Brothers came out, which was a big deal, and a lot of other things that were tied to that. So I was in that unit that was in that battle. And so that's kind of, you know, how I kind of found myself interested in that particular battle. Now, how do I write my nonfiction stories? So I try to pick, it's never been turned into a movie, by the way, but I've always kind of had it in my thought process where can I turn this subject into a movie? And does it have all the right beats, if you will, all the right touch points that you would have in a good, you know, hour and a half to 2 hour movie. And so not all historical events fit into that They don't generally have a beginning and an end. A lot of your historical events might have a beginning and then they just kind of drift off. So I'm always looking for an event that has a clear start point, an end point, a climax, just like you would have in a good book or a good movie. So that's generally how I figure out what stories I'm going to pick. So there have been stories that I found interesting, but they just didn't fit that that framework that I was looking for. And so that's where I kind of ended up with the stories I ended up writing. They all kind of fit into that framework where there's a beginning, there's an end, there's, you know, several kind of touch points and a final great climax. And that's always been kind of how I use to find out what I'm going to write about when it comes to nonfiction.
Wow. And also, that's such an amazing answer you've got in there. I love your take on it, and it's quite beautiful and quite awesome for me. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Also, I'd like to ask you, Leo, are there any moment in history you are eager to explore in future books, or perhaps even stepping into other eras or conflict? And also, why did you switch from writing nonfiction to fiction? I'm curious.
So, are there any other histories that I would like to get into? I'm interested in a lot of different stuff. So when I, just as I mentioned earlier, when I went to Belgium, I visited some World War II sites, but I also went to the battleground of Waterloo, you know, which is not, you know, that's the Napoleonic Wars. I love going to American Civil War battlefields. I've toured a bunch of those. American Revolutionary War battlefields. I've toured a bunch of those. But in terms of like writing and researching, I don't really feel that I would be qualified to write about something in like the American Civil War. Or for that matter, in the Napoleonic Wars. There's a lot of great historians out there, you know, who've written about Waterloo, who've written about other battles, who've got a lot more expertise in those subjects.
Absolutely, professors.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I were to write about something, another history, it would probably either still be tied to the Korean War or the Second World War. And the thing is both of those, there's still a lot of uninvestigated or not really talked about subjects.
Love that.
And you would think, oh, World War II, there's a zillion books about World War II. And there are. There's literally hundreds, thousands probably. But it's such a big war. It's the largest war. There are still so many stories that really probably haven't been told or told well. And so I still think there's a lot of material there that I could write about, Peter. It's so now for Korea, that is in America, the Korean War is actually known as the Forgotten War because no one really writes about the Korean War. It happened between World War II and Vietnam in our history. So a lot more people write about Vietnam. A lot more people write about World War II. Not too many people have written about Korea. So there's obviously a lot of stories there that still need to be told that I would, be interested in, doing. So yeah, that would be for my history stuff. But as I mentioned, I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by all forms of organized warfare. I love studying, like I said, the American Civil War, World War II, Napoleonics. I also love studying 100 Years' War. I love studying the Crusades. I love studying. I even love getting into things like one of my kind of little side projects was studying Anglo-Zulu wars from like
Hmm.
1878. You know, the Victorian small wars that the British Army fought. So I have just a very vast,
I love that.
interest in all these conflicts.
I love
Uh,
that.
um, so how did I end up writing fiction? Well, one, I was bored, as I mentioned, but two, uh, and this is more of a very mundane reason. I probably make more money writing fiction.
Oh,
uh, yeah, I mean and that's the truth. I've had several people who have asked me to write, hey, I want you to write another nonfiction history about this subject, and I'll tell them, I'll be like, hey, I think that subject's interesting, but it's not. I don't know if it's worth the effort in terms of the fiduciary compensation for writing about whatever subject that's being discussed. And the other issue is as a market,
yeah.
my reader. So when I would go to a conference to discuss one of my nonfiction books, the Patton
Mm,
books or No Silent Night or whatever,
yeah.
I inevitably I'll have an audience of a couple hundred people. I
Mm,
inevitably am generally one of the youngest people in the room.
wow.
Uh, so in reality, my market is literally dying. Like the people
Mm,
are, yeah, they're not being replaced.
mm,
Your your Gen Z, they're not as interested in that type of history, so they're
yeah.
just not going out and buying those books. So uh, so there's that. And now that's not to say that I'm not going to write nonfiction again. I probably will. Um, I just there isn't that motivation like I have for the fiction books that I write.
Mm. Oh, wow. I love your answer to that, really. That's quite amazing and quite beautiful. And your answer to that actually want to make me to ask you to diversify a little bit into the topic of readers' feedbacks. Because one of the things that I love mostly as a writer and reader is to sit back and listen to readers' feedback. If you want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite complex is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinions. And for
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has written, I mean, in your particular team, of history of war, which is like a very sensitive theme, I'll call it in literature. Yeah, you can have some people
Okay.
like, yeah, how dare him say that? Oh, I need some more historical background into this. So when it comes to fact and figures, something of that nature, history together. But then I wanted to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your work? Because some people may get a message that the author intended, some may be close to getting the message, some may actually get the message in entirety, and some may just hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. As interestingly fun as this sounds, I'd like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a storyteller?
Um. So for my nonfiction, I really go out of my way to get the
All
different
the facts.
perspectives.
Mm.
So especially when I write World War II, I
Yeah.
really try to get German perspectives. So I have to go into the German records, and if I can, I'll even try to get civilian perspectives, civilians who are at the
Yeah.
battle, and I try to present each of those because when you're uh, doing a story about a battle, and I hate to, I'm trying to remember who said it. It might have been Duke of Wellington, but when you're trying to write about a battle,
Yeah.
it's like you're trying to write about a tennis match.
Mm.
And if you're only writing about one side, it's like only writing about the perspective of the one tennis player. You don't understand why the ball is going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think this is Wellington's analogy.
Mm.
And so that's why I've always tried to get the different perspectives. So you have both tennis players. You understand why the ball is going in certain directions.
Yeah.
Uh, so for my fiction, I've actually had this. So that's a little bit different, obviously, and I've had some weird comments. Most, as you mentioned, most of the comments have been overwhelmingly positive. Um, the readers like it, but I'll
Yeah.
have like a couple where the person will be writing that I'm writing some kind of propaganda.
Oh,
Um, uh,
wow.
for I had one person. I wish I remembered the reader's
Name.
tagline, but it was basically like, "You're writing propaganda for the military-industrial complex,"
Wow.
and
Wow.
I was part of some. I was part of some conspiracy,
I
and I was
understand.
like, "Yeah," I was like, "No, no one's hired me. No one's, So
Wow.
that was kind of funny. That I did not expect. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I'll get um, some weird ones,
Feedback.
and then going back to the nonfiction.
Mm.
I tend to run into. It's kind of weird. I tend to run into. I'm trying to think of a good way of describing it. Uh, let's just say call it what it is. Nazi apologists, and
Mm.
I shouldn't maybe use the word Nazi, but German army apologists who are like trying to defend why the German army did something and what have
Wow.
you. Um, and you run into those more often than you think. Uh,
Mm. Mm.
and that's always kind of interesting and then when I mean apologists, I don't necessarily mean like they're trying to defend, Nazi ideology,
Yeah.
but what they are trying to defend normally is like, oh, the German army was the greatest army in the world, and
Mm.
the German army would have won World War II if it hadn't been for
Yeah.
Hitler being stupid, and that's like a common theme uh, that I've run into, and it's kind of interesting because you're like, okay,
Mm.
well, that's all well and good, but
Yeah.
if the German army was so great, it lost. So there had to be a reason why it lost. Uh,
Oh my God.
and it wasn't necessarily just bad decisions by one guy. Uh,
Yeah. That's amazing, really. I love your take on that. That's quite beautiful to know. Thank you so much for mentioning. Thank you. And just in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a copy of any of your books, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
so they are all available on Amazon,
Mm.
and you can also get them through my website, leobarron.com. But
Yeah.
all of them are available on Amazon. You can get all of them on trade paperback. You can get all of them on Kindle. They're available on Kindle Unlimited. So if you belong to Kindle Unlimited, you can get those for free. And most of them are available on Audible. Uh,
Mm.
so if I remember correctly, Opplan Folda is available on Audible. Um, most of the nonfiction books are available on Audible. And
Mm.
Eagle Against the Bear will be available on Audible pretty soon, like
Mm.
probably in the next month or two.
Oh,
Uh,
that's
so I'm still, working through that.
that's
Um,
amazing.
so yeah, but yeah, they're all available on Amazon in all the different mediums. All listening, reading,
Yeah.
electronic, hardcover, trade paperback, all through Amazon.
That's amazing. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Leo Barron books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on his website and also on other platforms. I also left a link to social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Leo, for accepting the
Thank
invitation
you.
to be featured on P English Literature. And also this is really exciting and extremely welcoming. So thank you very much for joining Han.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.